This is Gemara and Kesubos Daf Nun Aleph, and today's shir has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as a schos shidduch for Rav Arisha Bas Tavayra Mir Tashem. The learning the entire Chabura should bring Rav Arisha Bas Tavayra a quick and easy shidduch hagoin bekarov. The schos HaTorah should aid in her finding her basharetz very quickly. We pick it up from the Gemara on Nunam Beis. There are 5 lines from the bottom in which the Gemara says, "Ha'uda asli kamei Rav Yosef." There was someone that came in front of Rav Yosef, again, continuing the theme that we learned yesterday. This is a Yisaima. This is a girl that comes to Rav Yosef and she wants support. She wants money. She wants food. Amr lahu, Rav Yosef says, Havalu mi tamri dal budya. Says Rav Yosef, go give her from the tamri, from the dates that are on the mats. Seemingly corroborating with that which we saw yesterday in the opinion, they're able to give them from metaltlin. You're able to pay this girl for the movable items. He's saying that you could give her the dates. That is how she will feed herself. Let's say she was a Baal Chayv. Let's say someone owed money. In such a scenario, you don't give metaltlin. Ask Abaye, miyav yavle mar. Would you never obligate metaltlin to pay, even for a real Baal Chayv, a real creditor? So why in this case are we saying that this girl is able to collect from the dates? A similar question that was mimicked yesterday numerous times. So Amrlei Abaye respond, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant is that which is fit for the mats, meaning it's not on the mat yet. It's about to come off the tree. That is the item that I said that you should feed her with, meaning Abaye is saying you should give her support from the karka, from the dates that are on the trees. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Ask the Gemara, but we know that there's a halachic concept that anything anything that's about to be cut off has the status of being cut off. So if these dates are about to fall or about to be cut off, they should be viewed halachically as if they're ready off the tree, as if they're ready to fall off, and therefore they should have the status of metaltlin. Answers Gemara, no. Abaya meant they still need the palm tree, so they have the regular status of karka, the regular status of land, and that is the reason why Abaye wanted to utilize these items to support this girl. And we continue with a similar story 2 lines down in Aleph. There was a Yasaim and a Yisaim that came in front of Rava. Rava said to them, said Rava, give the Yasam, give the boy extra food, and he will utilize that to feed his sister, to feed the girl. Ask the Gemara, the Rabbanan said to Rava, but you Rava hold, you hold that when it comes to supporting a Yisaima, you only give from karka, you do not give from movable items. So what is for what? For any of these items, you do not give from a taltalin. So why are you all of a sudden, Rava, saying to give the boy extra and he'll feed his sister? Amr lahu, Rava responds, Ilu ratza shivcha l'shamushi mila avinalei. Said Rava, if this boy wanted a shivcha, if this boy wanted a maidservant to help him around the house, would we not give him extra food to give for the maid? Of course we would. So so too over here, we give the boy extra, as his sister is going to help out with the housework. The Rishonim explain, sister is going to help out around the house. Therefore, she's certainly no less than a regular maidservant. And we continue 8 lines down, the 2 dots. Before we continue, I forgot a quick apology for the audio issues in the previous day's shirim. I believe yesterday's shir, the audio was better. It's still not perfect as we're in transit. Our full studio is not set up. But I hope today should as well have good quality audio. And soon enough, we'll be back to our full setup and we'll be back to our excellent quality audio. But let's continue at the 2 dots, about 10 lines down. Tanu Rabbanan says the Gemara, whether we have properties that have a chayis, meaning that you have security upon them, or whether you have properties without a chayis, which of course refers to metaltlin. Moitziin lemazain isha ulebanais divrei Rabbi. Rabbi is of the opinion you use these items for the support. You use these items not only to use the karka, but you also use the metaltalin for the mazain, for the sustenance of the wife and the daughters. Rav Shimon Elazar Omer nechasim sheish lemachrayis. If you have karka, you have land that has security, moitzin lebanais min abanim. Then what do you do with such land? Such land, what you do with it is you take it away, moitzin lebanais, from the sons min habanim, for the daughters. Ulebanais min habanim, and you take it from the older daughters for the younger daughters. Ulebanim min habanim, and similarly from the older sons for the younger sons. Ulebanim min habanais, and similarly b'nechasim merubim, and similarly when there's an excess of properties from the daughters to the sons. Aval, here are the critical words of Rav Shimon Elazar. Le'lebanim min habanais b'nechasim muatim. When there are minimal amounts of properties, then we do not take from the daughters for the inheritance of the sons. Nechasim she'ein la'em achrayis, if it's movable property. Moitziin lebanim min habanim, ulebanais min habanais, ulebanim min habanais, aval loy lebanais min habanim. But you do not give the karka, do not give the metaltalin, the non-karka, for the sons, from the sons for the daughters. So we see from here that when it comes to metaltalin, we do not take away from the boys and give to the girls. So what do we see? We see similar to what we've been saying the whole day, that when it comes to feeding the daughters, ayisayma, we do not use the metaltalin. We do not use the movable properties. Explains the Gemara, Afagav, the Kaimelon Alach Gerabi Mechaveirav. Even though we generally paskin like Rebbe, Hacha Alacha Rav Shimon Elazar. Over here, we paskin like Rav Shimon Elazar, who doesn't make a difference between karka and metaltalin. Why? And this really wraps up the discussion which began yesterday. Says the Gemara that what is the halacha? The halacha is that you give from karka, not from metaltalin, being the ksuba, being the mezayni, being the parnasa, clearly proving this point that the metaltalin is not used for support, for payment of any of these items. And we continue with the Mishnah. The Mishnah discussing different parts of the ksuba, midrabanan, and their obligations of them. Says the Mishnah, Loi kasiv la ksuba b'sula. Loi kasiv la ksuba. And this really brings us all the way back to the beginning of the Masechta, teaching us the basic amount of every ksuba, regardless of that which is written. So says the Mishnah, Loi kasiv la ksuba. Let's say one did not write a ksuba at all. B'sula gava masayim v'almana mana. A b'sula, a virgin, a woman who never had relations, always gets a 200 zuz ksuba, and almana gets 100. V'neishu tanai bezdin, because such is a stipulation, a condition of the courts. Kasla sadeh shaveh mana tachas masayim zuz. Let's say that the husband wrote, here's a field that's worth only 100 in exchange of giving her 200. And he did not write that the rest of my properties are encumbered to your ksuba. And he's trying to get away with only giving her 100 and not 200. What's the halacha? Chayiv. He's still obligated to give her the full 200. Zoshu tonight bezdin again, because that is a stipulation of bezdin. Let's say he did not write to her, if you were captured, I will ransom you. Vosino li into, and I'll return you back to me as a wife. Or ubekayanis, in the case of a kayanis, adjunach lamdina seich, I will return you to your city, because he won't be able to marry her, but at least he has to ransom her to bring her back home. Still, he is obligated to ransom her. Why? Shehu Tanai Bezdin, the second Tanai Bezdin. And thirdly, Nishmis Chayiv Lefadaisa, and actually not thirdly, really continuing the second halacha, if she is indeed captured, he's obligated to redeem her. V'mamar, and if he says, Arigita Ksubasa V'tifti Ezatzma, if he tells her, here's your get, here's your ksuba, and use the money to redeem and ransom yourself, Einar Rashai, he is not permitted, he cannot exempt himself from ransoming her. Laksa, chayiv l'rapaisa. If she is sick, he has to heal her. Amar regidu ksubasa tirbra asatzma. But when it comes to her being sick, if he says, here's your get, here's your ksuba, and utilize it to heal yourself, says the Mishnah, then he is allowed to do such rashai. So says the Gemara in classical Gemara form, who is the Tana of the Mishnah? Mani. Who is the Mishnah on the first wide line? Rameir, he suggests the Gemara is the opinion of Rameir the Amar, Kol ha'pa'oiches lebesula mimasayim la'mana mana, harei zebi lasnos. If one tries to give his wife who's a besula less than 200, if he tries to give his wife who is a beula less than 100, it does not work, and it's considered as if it is a bilas nos, the marriage is not binding. It is a bilas nos. So seemingly that's just like the din of the Mishnah, that there's an obligation of 200 and 100 regardless of that which someone says. And explains the Gemara further, Di Rav Yehuda, because if you would tell me that the Mishnah is the opinion of Rav Yehuda Amar, he says, because one is allowed to write, here's a 200 zuz ksuba, and she writes back, I've already accepted 100, or or he can write to Almana, here's 100 zuz ksuba, and she says it's as if I accepted 50. So we see that Rabbi Yehuda does allow one to wiggle away from his obligation of 200 and 100. Clearly, not like our Mishnah. So says the Gemara, who is the Tan of our Mishnah? Seemingly it is Rameir. But continues the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom of the Amid. Ema Seifa, what does the end of our Mishnah say? Someone writes her a field and says this field, which is really only worth 100, should be in exchange of a field worth of your ksuba of 200. And he does not write everything is encumbered to you. What was the halacha chayiv? He's still obligated to give her the full 200. Why? Shutanai bezdin. Says the Gemara, that clause, the end of the Mishnah, is Asan Rav Yehuda. That seemingly is going like Rav Yehuda. Why is that like Rav Yehuda? Rav Yehuda is of the opinion that if one does not write Tachrayis, if one does not write, if one does not write that all his fields are guaranteed for the item, it's a mistake by the Sefer, meaning it's automatically binding even without writing it. So seemingly the end of the Mishnah is like Rav Yehuda. Why? Because Rameir disagrees with that point. Rameir holds, Rameir holds, then no. If one does not write a chrayis, if one does not write a guarantee, if one does not encumber his properties, then they're not considered security on the item. So seemingly the end of the Mishnah does not go with Rameir. And obviously the question of the Gemara is that the beginning of the Mishnah is like Rameir and the end is like Rav Yehuda. But now we just proved the second detail, this machlek is Rameir Rav Yehuda with regard to if one forgets to write the achrayis. On the last line, the Tanam we learned in the Mishnah, Masha Shtitri Chayf, someone finds a loan document turning over to, and then Aleph Amabis. If in this loan document there is a achrayis nechasim, lo yachzir. If it says in there that there's a achrayis, that there's a security, one should not return the document to the lender. Why not? Bezdin Ephraim man, because Bezdin utilizes such a document to collect money, and we don't necessarily know. Maybe it was already paid. But let's say there was no achrayis written in the shtar, then yachzer, then you could return it. Why? Shein Bezdin Ephraim man, because Bezdin does not utilize such a document as paying. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So we see clearly Rabbi Meir holds that if someone does not write achrayis, we view it as if there is no achrayis. But neither one you should return to Bezdin Ephraim Mehem. So now we see, and the Gemara articulates the question 5 lines down on an Aleph Amavis, Reisha Rameir V'Sever Rav Yehuda. The first part of the Mishnah was clearly Rav Yehuda, but now the second part of the Mishnah, when he doesn't write achrayis, is seemingly like Rameir. Suggests the Gemara V'Chitema Kula Rameiri, and maybe you'll tell me the whole Mishnah is Rameir. V'Shani later Rameir V'Ksuva L'Shtari, and maybe Rameir will differentiate between a ksuba and a shtar. That in this Mishnah that he said if you don't write achrayis, there is no achrayis. That's by a shtar. But maybe a ksuba is different. But says the Gemara, Mishani lei. But is there indeed such a difference? V'atanya. But we learned in a brayso, Chamisha gavim minha hamechayrarin. 5 creditors are able to collect only from that which was not sold. They cannot collect from properties which were sold that are indebted. Ve'elohein, who are these 5 people? Peiros, Ushvach Peiros, and Makabel of Lazanes ben Ishtai, Ubas Ishtai, Viget, Chayv, Shein ben Machrayis, and what's the final one? Uksubas Isha, Shein ben Machrayis. So we see clearly that a Kesubos Isha without a Chayis, according to Rameir, is viewed as if there is no Achrayis. Naman Shamas Le Damar Achrayis Lavtoy Soifer is Rameir. Vakatani Kesubos Isha. So we see clearly that Rameir does not differentiate between the din of a Kesuba and a regular star, that even by a Ksuba Rameir holds, if you did not read Achrayis, there is no Achrayis, and you're not able to collect from sold fields, you can only collect from unsold properties. So the Gemara is back to the problem that who is the Tana of the Mishnah? Seemingly the first part of the Mishnah is Rav Yehuda, and the latter part of the Mishnah is Rameir. Answers the Gemara, Yibayisim Rameir, Yibayisim Rav Yehuda, we can reconcile it with either Rameir or Rav Yehuda's opinions. Either I get to use Rav Yehuda, and in the Mishnah on Nun Dalid, she said explicitly, I have received the payment. And that's why Rav Yehuda said we view it as if she received it. Whereas in our Mishnah, if she did not write it, she just said, yeah, it's okay, it's as if I got 100 zuz. That's not enough. And that's when the Mishnah said they have to pay the full 200. But not that it's inherent that a woman can never waive her right. Really, Rav Yehuda holds a woman could, yes, waive her right, as long as it's written. What does it mean? Chayev de Katani minachat muchurarin. Now, when the Mishnah said that you're chayev, all it meant, it did not mean that you're chayev and you're able to collect from properties that are sold. Rather, it just meant that you're chayev and you're able to collect from unsold properties. We continue about 15 lines down, the 2 dots in which the Gemara quotes the Mishnah that says, Lo yikasav lo v'chulu. If he does not write, then I'm going to ransom you, I'm going to redeem you, he's still obligated to do this. Amar Avua de Shmuel, 7 lines from the wide line, says, the father of Shmuel, Eishes Yisrael shenensa asura labaylo. A woman, a regular Yisrael, she is forced to have relations, she is raped, asura labaylo. She's not able to go back to her husband. Why not? We generally know the halacha, we've seen many times this mesechta, that forceful relations do not forbid one to their husband unless he is a kayin. But a non-kayin is allowed to live with his wife even after she's forced to have relations. So why does Avua de Shmuel say Asur Labayla? Explains the Gemara. We're afraid maybe the beginning of the act was with coercion and they forced her to have relations, but maybe at the end she consented. So ask the Gemara 1 second. Rav Lavua de Shmuel asks Rav, it says in our Mishnah that if you're captured, I'm going to redeem you and return to you as my wife. So what do we see clearly in the Mishnah? That after he redeems her from captors, he's allowed to stay with his wife. Clearly we see that when the captors violated her, we do not assume that it was willing. Ishtik, the father of Shmuel, was quiet. Kari Rav Alei Davud Shmuel, Rav said about the father of Shmuel, Sarim Atsu B'molim V'kav Yesimu L'piyam. Ministers withhold their words and place their hands in their mouth. Meaning, the Gemara is saying that really the father of Shmuel had without which to answer, and Rav was commenting how he bit his tongue, how he did not answer him. Says the Gemara, what could he have answered? Seemingly it's a good question. Explains the Gemara, no, b'shvua kilu. He could have answered that shvua is different. Because in the case of shvua, in the case of a captor, the reason maybe we allow her to go back to her husband is because we did not see her be violated. We suspect that every time they capture a woman, they violate her, but we do not see the act. So maybe that's the reason why we are more lenient. Ask the Gemara, okay, good answer. But ask the Gemara the question that we began with. We know, we learned all over this Masechta that anytime there's an act of Aines, the halacha is you're allowed to stay married. So what is that case of Aines? What is that case of forceful relations? That you're allowed to stay married if the father of Shmuel is teaching us we're always suspectful that at the end of the day she might consent. Answers the Gemara in the first white line, the case is in which Eidim heard she was screaming from the beginning into the end, and therefore we clearly know that she did not consent. When did the father of Shmuel say that she is not allowed to go back to her husband? When we are concerned that maybe halfway through the act she consented. But if we hear her screaming the whole time, then we know that is not the case. And says the Gemara, this opinion of the father of Shmuel Pliga de Rava argues with Rava Dama Rava. Any time you have an act that began as coercion and ends with consent, even if at the end of the day she yells, leave me alone, leave him alone. She says, even if he didn't force me, I would have hired him. I want to stay with this man. Still, says Rava Mutares, still she's allowed to go back to her husband. Why? Seemingly this is a clear case that it's not coercion, that she's agreeing to this terrible act. My taima, says the Gemara in the fourth Y line, you know why? Yetzer al-basha. It's her Yetzer hara, that which pulled her over. Meaning, once she began the act, once this man forced her into this act, then she began, and once she was in the middle, she had this uncontrollable desire to continue. But Rav is explaining that is not called ratzin. Ratzin is when one willingly has relations while they are married. But if this woman was forced into an act and she just agreed it to end, says Rava, that's not called willing relations. She's still allowed to go back to her husband. Tanya Kavasi the Rava, says the Gemara Verayat to Rava, the pasuk says Vila Nitbasa, and she was not forced. Asura, she's forbidden to her husband. Hanitbasa mutares. And there's another case, even though she is not forced, mutares veizazu. And what is this case in which she's not forced and she's still allowed to go back to her husband, to go to the chasa be'aynis v'seifa b'ratzayin, clearly proving the point of Rava. Any time the act begins ba'aynis, even if it ends b'ratzayin, she's still allowed to go back to her husband. Says the Gemara, once we're darshaning these psukim, Tanya Idach, we have another Raisa that learns, Vila Nitzbasa, she was not forced, Asura, on Nitzbasa, if she was yes forced, Mutaris. Asura, Veizazu, what is this case of a woman who is forced and she's still forbidden to her husband? We've learned this already. So Aisha is Kayin, this is the wife of a Kayin that's not allowed to go back home. Even if it was forceful relations, a Kayin is never allowed to be back with that wife. Amar Avuda, Amar Shmuel, Mishra Yishmael, Vila Nitzbasa, a third way of learning the pasuk, Asura. On Nitzbasa, if she's forced, Mutaret, Ishachar, Zavavish, on Nitzbasa, Mutaret, Veizazu, what's its case? Shekadusha Ita is a case in which the Kedushim was a mistake. Shafilu Banam or Kaval Kseifa, even if she has a child riding on her shoulders, Mimaenes, Vailechas La, she's always able to walk out of the marriage, and they explain this is referring to a case in which she got married, Al Tanai, as Rashi in the first white line explains, and the husband did not fulfill the Tanai, then even if she has a child, she's allowed to walk out of that marriage. Let's just finish up today's daf with Amar Rav Yehuda. Says Rav Yehuda, Hani Nashi, these women, they ganvi, that are kidnapped, Sharyon, the Govrayu, are still permitted to their husbands. Hani Nashi, the ganvi, Shar, the Govrayu. Amrli Rabban, the Rav Yehuda, 10 lines from the bottom, first one line is lay. Says the Gemara Namu. But we see that these women are giving their captors bread. It seems that they're willingly staying with them. So why are we saying they'll let it go back to their husband? It seems that they're living with them willingly. Answers the Gemara, Machmas Yira, no, just because they're afraid of their captors. Ask the Gemara, Giri. But we see that they're giving them arrows, helping them fight. Again, Machmas Yira, they're afraid. Vadishav Kinu, Vazim and Avshayu, then Asiran. But says the Gemara, if the banders allow the woman to go back home and they choose not to leave, then they are indeed asr to their husband, because that is indeed an act of ratzain. And we conclude today's share with Tanara Abana and Shavuye Malchus Arei Kishvuye Genuvi. Says the Gemara, someone who's captured by the king is like a regular captivity and is allowed to go back to their husband. But Genuve listis Einon Kishvuyan. But women who are kidnapped are not like regular captives and are forbidden from their husbands. Says a moment ago we learned the opposite. Malch explains the Gemara 5 lines to the bottom. Malchus like Hasha. When it's a case of Malchus Achashverosh, they know that they're never going to stay married to the king, and therefore, anytime that they sleep with the king, it's under duress, it's ba'ines, and therefore she's always mutter to her husband. But when it's a Malchus of Ben Netzar, then the captor of this woman might think, wait, maybe I'll be able to get married to the king, and therefore she does it willingly. And similarly, listim alissus lokasha ben Netzar, but listis the alma. One is the bandit like Ben Netzar. Again, he's a chashav guy, so one might hope to marry him, but a regular bandit, one would never hope to marry him. It says the Gemara, Ben Netzar, Hasam Karle Melech, Karle list him. What's going on? Is he a king or is he a robber? Says the Gemara in Kavi Achashverosh, list him who? Kavi listen to Alma Melech. He's somewhere in between. He's not as chashav as Achashverosh, but he's more chashav than regular robber. We'll pick it up from the next Gemara in the next year. V'siyata Dishmaya.